Welcome to today's deep dive. I am incredibly excited to have you here with us because today we are placing you right in the middle of a high-stakes, realistic IT troubleshooting scenario.
Yeah, this is a fun one.
It really is. We are unpacking a highly detailed set of notes and visual materials from an independent exam prep resource. It's called the RHCSA series. Now, just to set the stage up front, this is an independent resource.
Right, completely unaffiliated with Red Hat.
Exactly. Completely unaffiliated. But their mission, which is stamped right on the materials we're looking at, is entirely focused on helping you pass the notoriously rigorous RHEL 10 EX200 exam.
And for those who might not have the acronym memorized, that's the Red Hat Certified System Administrator certification.
Yes, thank you. We are specifically looking at the grounding material for Episode 31, Advanced Archive Recovery. This sits right in the thick of their Season 2. That's their 25-part scenario block covering episodes 26A through 50.
It's a really comprehensive block.
It is. But before we even touch the technical disaster waiting for us, I have to paint a picture of the visual flair that comes with this source. The cover art for this specific scenario features their mascot, and it sets the mood perfectly.
Oh, the penguin. I love this guy.
Right. Picture a highly realistic, really dapper penguin wearing a crisp tuxedo and a bow tie. This penguin is standing squarely in the middle of a sleek, high-tech server room with all these glowing lights on the racks.
Just completely unfazed by everything.
Totally unfazed. In one wing, the penguin is holding a silver microphone. In the other wing, it is casually holding a bright blue, condensation-covered soda can. It is exactly the kind of cool, calm, and collected energy you need when the servers are melting down.
Which they absolutely are in this scenario.
Oh, big time. Speaking of melting down, let's talk about the hook for today's deep dive. You are stepping into a server environment where a destructive runaway script has completely wiped out all the permissions in a highly critical application directory.
Located at OpTap server data.
Right. The script set everything to 000. No read access, no write access, no execute access. Because of this, the automated backup system has completely halted. Okay, let's unpack this. Your challenge is that you need to fix this server to pass your exam. But the so-called easy fix that jumps to mind will instantly fail you and completely compromise the system's security.
Yeah, the situation you were walking into is effectively a digital locked door behind another locked door inside a bunker. A permission state of 00 means that the owner, the group, and everyone else on the system have absolutely zero rights to those files.
None at all.
None. You can't open them, you can't modify them, and in the case of directories, you can't even look inside them to see what files actually exist.
And the scenario details are very specific about the state of this server.
Very specific. Inside that OpTap server data directory, you have dummy configuration files like app1.conf, and you also have nested directories containing more files like config sap2.conf. Every single one of them has been stripped bare of permissions.
I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, though. If it is 3 a.m. and the automated backup is failing, and maybe a manager is breathing down your neck, why not just run a recursive 755 permission change?
Ah, the classic sledgehammer approach.
Right. You see people type chmod-r777 or 755 against an entire directory structure all the time just to get things moving again. The backup system gets access, the alert turns off. What is the actual harm if these are just internal configuration files?
What's fascinating here is how elegantly this scenario tests a core security principle. Specifically, what the source identifies as objective 1.din. Applying a blanket recursive permission like 755 using that -r flag is a critical failure point on an exam and honestly a massive liability in the real world.
Because it's too broad.
Way too broad. When you apply 755 recursively, you're not just unlocking the directories, you're improperly making sensitive data files executable. You are telling the operating system that a simple text configuration file like app1.conf is actually a program that can be run.
Wait, so just by trying to give the backup system the ability to read the text, we are accidentally giving the entire system the ability to run that text as if it were a script.
That is the exact trap. You are essentially turning static text files into potential vectors for malicious code. If an attacker manages to inject a script into one of those configuration files, you have already given them the permission to execute it.
Wow. Okay, that's terrifying.
In a production environment, an automated process or a compromised user account could trigger that file, and suddenly you have a massive breach. The overarching philosophy of system administration and what these exams rigorously test is the principle of least privilege. You only grant the precise permissions necessary for a task to be completed and nothing more.
It's like leaving the keys in the ignition of every single car in a parking lot. just because you wanted to make sure the valet could move one of them.
That is a perfect analogy.
We really want to remind you why this matters so much outside of an exam room. Being a trusted system administrator is not just about making things work, it is about making them work securely. Precision is what separates a novice from a seasoned professional. You cannot take a sledgehammer to a problem that absolutely requires a scalpel.
Exactly. You have to fix the access without opening up a massive security vulnerability.
Which brings us to the surgical strike required to solve this. But before we execute the fix, the source material walks us through setting up the practice environment.
Right, you have to build the sandbox before you play in it.
Yeah, the lab actually starts by running a quick script to make sure your baseline tools are installed. Things like tar for archiving, bzip2 for compression, and finddiddles for the search operations we are about to perform before it intentionally breaks your system.
It builds out that whole nested directory structure, generates the dummy configuration files, and simulates the disaster by intentionally stripping all the permissions down to 0.
It also sets up a completely separate backup manager directory, right?
Yes, where our final archive is eventually supposed to live.
So if the trap is set, the files are locked down, and we need a solution that avoids the recursive sledgehammer. And as we established, you can't just change everything at once. You absolutely must isolate the directories from the actual files. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the tool we use for this is not just tree mode on its own. We're going to bring in the find command.
When you are operating at this level, the find command is your scalpel. We need to apply 2 entirely different security postures, one for the directories and one for the files. First, we have to target only the directories.
How do we isolate those?
You do this by running find against the target path, which is optap server data, and filtering by type D. That allows you to isolate the directories so you can fix their traversal rights without touching the files.
Okay, so it finds just the folders.
Right. And once isolated, you use the execute flag within find to run shmmod 755 strictly on those results.
I want to pause on that for a second because I think it trips a lot of people up. Why do directories need execute permissions? If we just said making text files executable is a huge security risk, why are we handing out execute rights to a folder?
That is a great question. For a directory, the execute bit means something entirely different than it does for a file. It doesn't mean you run the folder like a program. It grants traversal rights.
Traversal rights.
Yes. It gives the operating system the ability to enter or walk through that directory to see what is inside and access the metadata of the contents. Without execute permissions on a directory, you cannot access the files within it, even if the files themselves have wide open read and write permissions.
So you have to unlock the hallway before you can open the doors to the individual rooms.
Exactly. That makes perfect sense. So 755 gives the owner full rights and gives the group and the world the ability to read the directory contents and traverse into it.
So once the hallways are unlocked, how do we handle the actual files without falling back into that trap of making them executable?
You run a second, completely separate find command. This time, you filter by F to target only the files. And for the files, you apply a completely different permission. You use chmod 644.
Let's break down that octal for everyone.
Sure. The 6 gives the owner read and write capabilities, while the 4s give the group and the world strictly read-only access. Notice there is no execute bit anywhere in that 644 octal.
By separating the operation into 2 distinct commands, you restore the ability to read and write the configuration files without accidentally making a single one of them executable.
You fix the automated backup system's access without creating a security hole.
If we connect this to the bigger picture...
Actually, if I can jump in, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this dual command approach perfectly satisfies the underlying security concepts of Objective 9.1. It is a textbook demonstration of the principle of least privilege.
You're giving the system exactly what it needs to function.
Traversal rights for directories, read and write rights for files, and absolutely nothing more. You aren't cutting corners. You are engineering a precise solution to a complex problem.
Okay, so the doors are unlocked, the files are safe, we've stopped the bleeding, but the whole reason we noticed this was because the automated backups failed in the first place.
Right, the system is still broken.
We faced the next major hurdle in the scenario. We need to actually get that backup system back online securely. The objective requires you to create a bzip2 compressed archive of that newly secured data. It needs to be named app-data.tar.bz2 and stored in that backup manager directory.
But there are strict rules about who owns it.
Yeah, the scenario demands that this archive be earned by a newly created backup JSVC account. Why go through the trouble of creating a whole separate user just to own a zip file?
Because automated backup processes should never require root access if it can be avoided. Creating that dedicated service account highlights a vital operational security step. By isolating your backup operations to a service account, you are creating a blast radius.
A blast radius, I like that.
Yeah, if the automated backup process is somehow compromised, or if a malicious actor gains control of the backup mechanism, the attacker only has the privileges of that specific backup SVC user. They don't have the keys to the entire kingdom as the root user. Once the archive is created, ensuring the ownership is correctly transferred to that service account is non-negotiable for system security.
That brings up a fascinating mechanical challenge. We have to build the archive so we can hand over ownership. But this scenario throws a massive curveball at you regarding how you build it. It's all about absolute versus relative paths.
This is where a lot of candidates fail.
Wait, if I am sitting at the root level of my server and I just tell the tar command to zip up OpTap server data, isn't that going to bake the entire file path into the backup?
Yes, and that is a massive risk. If you provide an absolute path, one that starts with a // to the tar command, you are essentially hard-coding the directory structure into the archive.
But doesn't tar usually fix that for you?
Modern versions of tar will actually try to protect you by default. It will strip that leading / and throw a warning to the screen. But relying on default failsafes during a certification exam is a recipe for failure. And in the real world, it is incredibly dangerous.
Why is it so dangerous? If the backup works, why does the path matter so much?
Imagine a scenario where a junior administrator needs to restore a single configuration file from that backup to test something in a temporary directory. If that archive was built with absolute paths and they extract it without realizing it, the archive will force its own structure. Exactly. It will navigate to OpTap server data and silently overwrite the live production files with the historical backup data. A portable backup should never enforce where it has to be unpacked. It must be flexible.
So how do we guarantee portability? How do we stop the tar command from recording the full opt path?
To achieve true portability, we have to look at the exact tar command the source provides. We know we need an SEC to create the archive, -J to specify bzip2 compression, and F to name the file. But the absolute magic here is the mandatory use of the nesc flag.
That's a capital C.
Capital C, which stands for change directory. By passing nesc optap server before specifying the target folder data, you are telling the tar command to temporarily navigate into that specific parent directory before it even begins archiving.
So because we use -E to jump into the parent folder first, the archive only records data app1.conf. It doesn't record optap server data app1.conf.
Precisely. It is completely relative.
That means when you need to restore this backup, you can safely unpack it into a temporary testing folder, and it will just create a folder called data right where you were standing. No warnings, no overwriting production system files.
Exactly. It creates a clean, portable asset. But there's one more flag we cannot overlook in that string of tar options, the -P flag, which stands for preserved permissions.
What happens if we forget the -P flag? Does the backup still work?
The backup completes, but all that surgical work we just did with the find command earlier would be completely lost.
Oh, because it doesn't remember the 644 and 755 changes.
Right. When someone extracts an archive without preserved permissions, the files simply inherit the default permissions of whatever user happens to be running the extraction at that moment. The backup must maintain the exact octal security posture of the original files. The JANA-P flag guarantees that the 644 file permissions and 755 directory permissions are baked right into the archive's metadata.
Okay, we've carefully fixed the permissions using find. We created the dedicated service account. We navigated the tricky JASC flag to keep our paths relative. We preserved our permissions with back, and we transferred ownership over to our service account. The backup is sitting securely in the backup manager directory. We are clear to log off right.
This raises an important question about blind faith in IT operations. In high-stakes environments, whether it is a timed certification exam or a live production data center, you must verify your work. You cannot simply run a command, see that it didn't throw an immediate error, and assume it executed perfectly.
You have to prove it.
You have to prove it. The source outlines a very specific verification phase. You need to inspect the contents of that archive.
But how do we inspect the backup without actually extracting it? We just talked about the dangers of unpacking files in the wrong place. We don't want to ruin the very system we just fixed just to test if the zip file works.
You use a variation of the tar command. Instead of creating, you instruct tar to list the contents. You run a tar-tvf against your newly created archive. The dash tells the utility to simply list what is inside.
And the dash.
The dash is the verbose flag, which is critical here because it forces the command to display the deep metadata of the archive contents, not just the file names. It allows you to look inside the box without opening it.
So when we run that command, what exactly are we looking for in that wall of text to prove we did it right?
You are looking for visual proof of two critical things. First, you must verify the paths. The output must show paths starting strictly with the data. If you see optap server data, you instantly know your myc flag failed or was placed incorrectly in the command string, and you have created a dangerous absolute path.
And the second thing.
Second, because we use the verbose flag, the output will list the specific permissions of every single file and directory inside the archive. You must verify that the output perfectly reflects the 644 and 755 octals you painstakingly restored. If the paths are relative and the permissions are exact, you have concrete proof that your solution is robust, secure, and ready for deployment.
I really appreciate that methodology. Trusting your tools but verifying their output is such a crucial habit to build. And to wrap up the technical execution of this scenario, the source material emphasizes a zero-trace cleanup.
Always clean up your workspace.
Always. As a professional, you don't leave your testing mess behind for the next administrator to stumble over. You run standard removal commands to recursively force remove the lab directories. Then, you delete the service account and completely wipe its associated home directory. You leave the server exactly as pristine as you found it, with no lingering artifacts or backdoors left behind from your operations.
It's just good practice.
It really is. So, what does this all mean? Let's take a step back and look at the journey you just completed. You were dropped into a server where a critical application directory had 0 permissions, completely breaking the automated backup system. You resisted the intense psychological trap of the brute force recursive sledgehammer.
Which would have failed you instantly.
Instantly. Instead, you utilized the absolute precision of the find command to isolate variables. You restored directory traversal rights and file read-write access without making a single sensitive configuration file executable. You isolated a backup process by creating a dedicated service account to limit the blast radius. You utilized advanced tar flags to build a compressed archive that maintained those exact security permissions while utilizing relative paths to ensure total portability. And finally, you proved your work by meticulously inspecting the archive without extracting it, followed by a flawless, zero-trace cleanup.
It's a very satisfying workflow when you put it all together.
This deep dive is not just about memorizing a string of Linux commands to pass an exam. The syntax of commands will change as operating systems evolve. What we are really talking about is fundamentally adopting an engineering mindset. It is about valuing precision over speed. It is about prioritizing portability over rigid structures. And above all, it is about maintaining absolute security over mere convenience. That mindset is what will make you an invaluable asset in any technical environment.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. We just spent all this time and effort strategizing with find, crafting the perfect portable tar command, verifying the octals, all to perfectly fix the permissions and secure this backup. But remember the very first sentence of the scenario brief.
The runaway script.
Exactly. It stated that this entire disaster was caused by a runaway script. We expertly fixed the damage, but we never addressed the cause. If you don't hunt down and terminate that script, what happens the moment you restore your pristine backup?
It just deletes the permissions again.
The script is still out there. Are you just feeding perfectly restored data right back into a wood chipper? Something for you to ponder the next time you find yourself treating a symptom without stopping to find the disease.